Welcome to Grace Talks, produced by Grace Media Productions and hosted by T-Dub Entertainment. Grace Talks is a podcast that informs and inspires to help you grow gracefully. Here you can enjoy great conversations, experience special guests, and encounter grace moments. Tune in now for an all-new episode of Grace Talks. Welcome to Grace Talks, the Super Bowl episode. We are here with our wonderful guests, our great commentators, the one and only Evan D. Stewart, and we call him the podcast man or the bad man. And then we got, no, that's what I call Will the bad man, right?
I thought so. I was hoping so.
Yes. And then Will the bad man Hedrick. So we got Evan, Will, and how are you guys doing today?
Oh, it's
Good,
Friday.
T. How are you? It's Friday, exactly.
It's Friday. You know, my motto, it's Friday, nothing else matters. So let's jump into it, guys. Let's get this because people are waiting and they want to know. So first and foremost, I have to jump into the championship games and find out how you all felt about those. First and foremost, let's jump into the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs won 23-20. Is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. Will, how did the Chiefs defend or choose to overcome this awesome threat called Joe Burrow? What do you think?
I mean, they got to him. You know, I know I was talking all this trash about Kansas's defense last week, like I always do every week of every NFL season. But you know, maybe the offensive line problems for Cincinnati was a bigger deal than we thought. You know, there was all this talk going into the postseason. Oh, their offensive line is beat up. What are they going to do? And then, you know, they got the Ravens, and then they beat up on the Bills, and everybody was like, oh, maybe it's not a problem. It seems like it was a problem. You know, Joe got hit how many times? An insane amount of times. It was like 19 or something like that. Which is not, you know, you don't think about the Kansas City defense being a defense that touches the quarterback almost 20 times a game on average. You know, obviously they have good games. So I think it was probably more the offensive line being as more damaged than we, you know, wanted to believe. But then, you know, something that your uncle said last week, sometimes we play down to the level of our opponent. Maybe Kansas just does that all the time. Maybe they deliver when they have to.
Evan, what were your thoughts?
I just thought that Kansas City secondary did a great job of scheming against the elite wide receivers that the Bengals possess. I mean, there were just so many pass breakups. Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Brian Cook. I mean, relative unknowns to most NFL viewers, all have really, really good games. And I mean, like Will already alluded to, I mean, it was clear that the Bengals' offensive line issues were going to come back and haunt them as they got further into the playoffs. And I mean, yes, the Chiefs did a great job just constantly throwing different pressures at Burrow. They had 5 sacks. Chris Jones had 2. Frank Clark had a sack and a half. And then it just seemed like he was constantly getting hit like every other drop back. And you got to give credit to the Chiefs secondary, man, because I mean, those Bengals wide receivers, it may be the best wide receiver room in the NFL, and they stepped up. And obviously, I think playing at home played a role for the Chiefs, as it usually does. But I mean, you got to give credit to that Chiefs defense. I mean, they're going to have their hands full this weekend, but they did a great job in containing Burrow this last weekend.
Guys, do you believe that the refs played a big role in the outcome of the game?
I think so.
I honestly do think so. I mean, Cincinnati made a lot of mistakes and there were a lot of errors within the game that, the game was close and you can't really let the refs determine the outcome. But I do think there were some highlighted instances, especially in the second half, where one would kind of wonder what's going on when Kansas City got 2 attempts at that third down. I mean, that was like what's going on. But then
Yeah.
again, Cincinnati made too many mistakes that ultimately cost them the game in the end, regardless.
Yeah, it's never one thing, right? And no matter how no matter how bad the refs are, because everybody remembers the Minnesota Miracle that should have never been, right? But the it was really bad, the misses that did happen. I think something, I can't remember who it was that said, this is an old quote, maybe it was Bill Parcells or somebody, but it was, you never know which 3 plays are going to decide the game, right? It could be 3 plays in the beginning, 1 in the beginning, 2 at the end, whatever it is. There's going to be 3 plays on average in an NFL game that decide how that game plays out. And I think that some of those questionable calls by the officiating were maybe 2/3 of those 3 plays.
And I mean, Marcus Spears made a really great point this week on NFL Live. As viewers, we're able to dissect every single play because we see replays constantly in slow motion. So as viewers, especially when we're fans of a team, we're like, how did they miss that call or how did they not call that? But the refs are having to see all this in real time.
Yeah.
And they're definitely going to miss calls throughout a game. I mean, they're not going to be perfect. And as viewers, we want them to be. But I mean, still, regardless, I've watched a lot of NFL playoff games, and the refs really. This was one of the few games where I think the refs really did have a somewhat of an impact on the outcome of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the refs had an impact, and the offensive line, I believe, had an impact. Will kind of hinted at that earlier. Evan, did you want to discuss that further about the fact that this offensive line was somewhat depleted and broken down, but they were able to get over that other
Right.
team the week before. We don't want to
Well,
rehash.
I think it kind of reminds me of when the Chiefs played the Buccaneers a couple years ago in the Super Bowl. They had a lot of offensive line starters in that game that were out or that were playing with, that were obviously being held back by injury. I mean, obviously this late in the year, every team is going to have injuries all over the front. Yeah, it's part of the game. But I mean, Joe Burrow is no Patrick Mahomes. He's not at that level yet where he can just improvise and make something out of nothing like Mahomes often does. And it was clear in this game that the offensive line, the depleted offensive line, definitely, we knew it was going to play a role at some point the further they got in the playoffs. And I mean, even despite that, they still only lost by 3 points. But yes, it had a major impact.
It was
in this
right
game.
within the point spread that I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a 3-point game in the 20s, just the other way around.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I'll go ahead to the elephant, the giant, the major catastrophe in the room. Joseph Asai, who wants to begin with that?
I think it's. Or go ahead, Evan.
Okay. As a diehard Texas Longhorn fan, it was really just heartbreaking to see him be involved in that play. And I mean, we saw the replay millions of times, and yes, it was clear that Mahomes was out of bounds whenever Osai made that play, but we have to remember that these guys are playing at 100 miles an hour, and he was just trying to make a play for his team. And honestly, if it weren't for that play, I would call him the MVP for the Bengals in this game. I mean, he was constantly putting pressure. He was great. He was putting pressure on Mahomes. I believe he had a TFL, and he was just all over the place. And I mean, I think him playing that good a game also played a role in that late hit out of bounds because I mean, he was just trying to make a play for his team, and you could tell that he was devastated once.
That was heartbreaking.
Yeah, once it came about, and he knew what happened, and obviously it led to the game-winning field goal. But he's going to get better from this. He's a great young player. He's one of the best players on that defense. And I think he's going to use this as a moment to grow. And I mean, you can't help but feel bad for him. Bengals fans are probably looking for his head right now, but the guy was playing with 100% effort and his heart was all over the field. And I feel so bad and devastated for him.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think I have the exact same sentiment as you. It's a high emotion situation right there. It's at the end of the game. You're tied with them 20-20, and the ball is in Patrick Mahomes' hands. There's almost nobody else that you want it to be in their hands, unless you're Osai and your quarterback is Joe Burrow, right? But the so of course you've got to do everything. You play until it's something that somebody has said. You know, this is another old quote, but you play until the echo of the whistle, not just the whistle. You know, like you are all out the whole time, and that's the mentality you're supposed to have as a professional athlete, right? It's a foul.
Yes.
100%. It was definitely a foul. It was a sloppy decision, I'll say. Uh, but it happens. It just happened to be on the last thing that happened in that game, so it stood out more, right? If that had happened in the first quarter, we wouldn't have forgotten about it.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
exactly. So, I mean, his emotions were crushed. It was very obvious of that. After the game was over, watching him on the sidelines was even hard to watch. I'll
Yeah,
be honest.
yeah, that was difficult.
But as you stated, Evan, he did play a very good game. Honestly, overall, except for the refs, because I didn't get a chance to talk about that portion. Um, Questioning you all, something went to the left for me when Kansas City got to play the same play 3 times.
Yeah, how does that happen?
That was problematic for me. And whatever, someone said, well, the game was fixed, or somebody got paid, or the referees weren't paying attention. Whatever the scenario was, it made me feel some type of way at that point. Joseph Asai, I agree. He just was doing his job, and it just so happens that he went too far. But
He's
other
not the reason they lost that game, in my opinion. I mean,
absolutely not.
no.
Absolutely not. Other than that, I would definitely say there were MVPs on both sides of the coin, on both sides of the field. Um, Hearing from you first, Evan, who were your picks
Well,
of
for the Bengals, I got to go with T. Higgins. I mean, everybody knows Jamar Chase is the guaranteed #1 option on that team, and I mean, he came out. Some of the plays that he made, especially on third down. I mean, I believe he tied the game at 20 with his touchdown catch in the third quarter. I mean, the guy was all over the field. I mean, as long as he and Chase are together going forward, that offensive firepower that the Bengals possess is going to be out of
Yeah,
this world. And so I got to go with him for the Bengals. On the Chiefs, I got to go with Valdez Scantling. I mean, everybody knows about Travis Kelce, and obviously with Valdez Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster being like the two top targets on that receiving core. I mean, Scantling came out and just played one whale of a game. He constantly bailed Mahomes out when it looked like he was being pressured, and he just made plays all over the field. Obviously, Kelce made his plays, but I think Valdez Scantling overshadowed Kelce to a degree just because of how big his plays were and some of the biggest high pressure moments of the game.
Will? What do you say?
I think those are excellent choices. I want to pick Mahomes for Kansas just because it's Mahomes, and he's still just out there doing it, even with the high ankle sprain. Um, but Valdez Scantling, for like a one-time performance, that was an incredible performance from a mediocre receiver, in my opinion. Um, he wasn't terribly successful in Green Bay. And he hasn't been terribly successful in Kansas, but he's gotten looks, right? But I've got the line here. He had 6 receptions for 116 yards and that 1 touchdown, which is you'll take that day any day, right?
Right.
For Cincinnati, I don't know. I didn't seem like anybody totally stood like they played really well, but they weren't. It wasn't the Bengals that I was expecting to see that day. As we know, where I'll end that, I guess.
I think I would have to agree with you on that, sir. I'm going to go way left for Kansas City and say
Harrison Butker.
McKinnon.
Oh.
Whoa,
Jerick McKinnon.
y'all weren't prepared for that. So he wasn't someone we were expecting to really make a statement, but there were several times that he got the ball where it seemed as if, okay, this is not going to work. And one time I actually remember them getting their hands on McKinnon in the backfield, and he still made a first down out of it.
His blocking was also really good this game.
Okay.
Yeah, those kinds of things that don't show up on the stat sheet, right?
Right,
Yes.
right. And then for Cincinnati, guys, I think I have to agree with you. It just really did not hold my attention. So I don't know. I don't know who stood out the most for me because I was prepared for a bigger show and I didn't get that. So Cincinnati, I would say Jamar Chase made a couple good catches that
That
stood
catch in
out.
the fourth quarter,
Yeah.
that was something
That,
special.
well, really, they got them to come to be, back in the game. So
Mhm.
I would say, yeah, Jamar Chase. So with that being said, we'll take a quick break and come right back to discuss the blowout. That's about all the words I can use. I'll just say we'll come back and discuss the blowout. We'll be right back.
You have a lot to say. Maybe you've thought, I should start a podcast. Meet Anchor, the easiest way to make a podcast ever. It's a powerful mobile app and web tool that lets you record a podcast anywhere and distribute it everywhere. It's great whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out. And it's 100% free. You can record your show straight into Anchor on your phone, iPad, or the web, using any mic you want. Record alone or with friends or co-hosts anywhere in the world. You can add background music and transitions, and your listeners can send you voice messages that you can incorporate right into your next episode. If you want to produce your show using another app, you can upload your own audio directly from web or mobile, and still take advantage of Anchor's totally free podcast hosting. Once your podcast is ready to publish, Anchor can automatically distribute it to every major podcast platform. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, so your listeners can hear your show wherever they want. And on the web, you can see detailed analytics about how people are listening. Plus, you'll get a great-looking profile page where anyone can listen to your podcast or subscribe to it. And if you want to ask your audience to support your work, Anchor makes it easy to collect monthly payments from the people who love your podcast and want to see it grow. You really don't need a recording studio, expensive equipment, or a bunch of technical knowledge to deal with a podcast feed. Just get started and join the diverse community of podcasters already on Anchor. We can't wait to hear your podcast.
Welcome back to Grace Talks, the sports edition, where we're discussing the championship games and looking forward to the Super Bowl. And now we're ready to discuss the blowout with the Philadelphia Eagles and San Francisco 49ers. Will, do you think that this game would have been close had Mr. Purdy not been injured?
Injured on the first play. I do think that it would have been a lot closer. That was awful. Brock Purdy is not the greatest quarterback in the league right now. But he looked hella good for being the third string quarterback on that team. You've never expecting to come in, and then he comes in and wins several games, gets through a couple of playoff games, and just all of that stuff. It certainly would have been close. They couldn't throw anything, and then not too long after, their fourth string quarterback got injured, and they were talking about having McCaffrey be quarterback. Because he did it in college, right?
I was ready to see that.
And yeah, that's what I wanted to see that too. I was like, good, he's on my fantasy team. I want him to get some more points. But then so then they bring Purdy back in just so that they could have somebody to receive the ball from the center. He still couldn't throw. They had to run they ran that whole game. is ridiculous.
I remember him throwing one short pass.
Like into the dirt, I think. I mean, maybe, that's, I'm half joking there, but I remember just looking for anything to come out from him, and I couldn't find anything.
That was pretty bad. Okay, Evan, could this game have been any closer if Brock was not hurt?
Obviously, the answer is yes. I mean, Purdy was playing really well. I think at the very beginning, he was 4 for 4. He was finding his checkdowns, and he was doing an admirable job of managing the game for San Francisco. And then obviously when Josh Johnson came in, I mean, he didn't really play all that bad. He had 74 yards passing, 7 for 13, I believe. And I mean, he did as admirably as one would expect a 4th or 5th string quarterback to do in a championship game. Because I think once Purdy went down, I think the Eagles defense, they just all looked at one another and they were like, okay, this is obviously a one-dimensional team now. And they played like it. I mean, they stopped the run. I mean, McCaffrey still had a great game, but yeah, I mean, it was obvious that Philadelphia's defense just teed off on the passing game and just focused on stopping the run.
So with seeing that happen, you did mention how they just became one-dimensional. Which front for the Philadelphia Eagles was more dominant, the offensive line or the defensive line?
I have to go with the offensive line. Philadelphia had 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground that really kind of helped create just a big stopgap and create some distance in the first half. I mean, you have Miles Sanders doing his thing, and then Gainwell, and then Hurts is obviously a real threat with his legs as well. I mean, and you can't obviously discredit the defensive line, but being that it was one-dimensional, I mean, Terrence, you probably could have gone in there and made some stops in the passing game for that defense, because it was obvious they were just focusing on stopping the running game, because that's all that San Francisco had left once.
That was it.
Yeah, you could stand still and probably have protected a pass effectively. I think I agree with Evan. I think the offensive line is the line that really, so, and partially because the defensive line didn't have to really do that much, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't really have to. At least they didn't have to play at S tier like they've been doing, right? They could knock it down to S minus. But that offensive line Hurts didn't throw a touchdown. He didn't even rush in a touchdown himself, I don't think. I think it was all from the running backs. So for them to, because Hurts is still injured, he keeps saying it, at least every single game. He is unashamedly saying, I am not 100%, guys. Which, if it's transparent and true, then I appreciate that. As opposed to all the bravado that quarterbacks usually have, like, oh, I just you a bit. But so for them to make up for Hurts, not being the Hurts that they want, and still just dominate to that way, and San Francisco is the number 1 ranked defense this year, and they still ran all over them.
Yeah, and I think they did a really good job. I mean, Hurts was kind of turned into a game manager, because, as Will alluded to, his stats really weren't all that great. I believe he only had 125 yards passing. I think he did have a touchdown on the ground late in the game. But at the same time, I mean, San Francisco did as good as they could have done, because both Philadelphia's running game and passing game is pretty elite. I mean, you got weapons all over the place. So, I mean, they could only really stop one. I believe they were going to get beat with either one or the other. And with Hurts' shoulders still not 100%, it was obvious that maybe the running game had to do it. And they did.
So, guys, I have to say this. We know that Brock Purdy being hurt, and we've all agreed on it, would have caused a different game. But I don't believe that was the only play for when he got hurt. I don't believe that was the only play that turned this game around. Just as Kansas City and Cincinnati didn't play all that magnificent, but they had that play that just pretty much turned the game in a different route. For this game, I would have to say, or shall I say question, the Devontae Smith catch on the first touchdown drive. Guys, let's break that down. Do you feel the refs missing the totality of the play was a defining moment in the game.
Well, it's certainly being, like you said, a part of the Eagles' first touchdown drive, and being so early on in the game. They went up. Did they go up 2 scores before San Francisco finally got that one touchdown? But
I
for
believe
them
it was,
to,
but no,
It
14.
was tied at 7.
It was
It was
tied
tied
at
at
7,
7,
then
okay.
14-7. Yes.
But for it to open up like that and as quickly as it did, and then I mean, you never know how the flow of a game is going to go. And at any point during that journey, something could happen that would have changed it. Because if they don't score on that drive, then Cincinnati, what do you do then, right, for your play calling? Everything moves differently because of
Right.
what happened before it, right?
Right, because let's not forget, Will, and I apologize for interrupting you, but let's remember San Francisco had the ball first and they did not score, and they
Right.
punted, and then Eagles got the ball and that situation took place.
Yeah, exactly. So it was big, and it was a big miss too. Live time with the aerial camera, it looks like a catch. But then once you see like even one more camera angle, you can see that it's not a catch. And yeah, we're at home. We have the benefit of seeing the slow motion and the multi angles, but the NFL has implemented practices for the refs to be able to resolve that kind of thing quickly. I forget what the phrase is called, but it's like, rapid review or something like that, where New York can take a look at the cameras and make a call into the field without them having to request New York to look at it. It's supposed to alleviate obvious things like that, and they just moved right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and it was also a 4th down play. So San Francisco would have gotten the ball back had that been reviewed. But I also think a big factor in all of this is defensive back Jimmy Ward not voicing his opinion on it, because he thought it was a catch too. And when Devontae got up, he was obviously signaling to the team.
Yeah, he was like, let's go.
And I mean, I was really shocked that, if Jimmy Ward would have made a complaint, I think they would have automatically reviewed it. But the fact that he just got up and assumed it was a catch really, I think, led to, the play not being called. But obviously, like you said, the NFL has implemented these types of rules to prevent something like that from happening. And I'm kind of surprised that none of the refs, when the play was made, saw that ball bounce, because yes, from certain camera angles, it looked like a catch. But as Will alluded to previously, obviously when you see camera angles that are facing Devontae from the other side, you can clearly see the ball bounce on the ground. And that put the momentum in Philadelphia's favor, and they ran with it and never let up the rest of the way.
This is true. They put their foot on the gas and they kept going to Arizona. So MVPs, Evan, from both teams for the game.
For the Eagles, I have to go with Hassan Reddick. I mean, I've been saying his name all year. It's really kind of funny because Von Miller's offseason signing with the Buffalo Bills was definitely like the biggest headliner in the offseason. But I think you can't discredit, or you can't say enough about what Reddick has done this year. I mean, leading a defense that had the most sacks in the NFL since the '85 Bears. And he had 2 sacks in this game. He had a TFL, was putting pressure. I mean, I think he was the one that caused that elbow injury that Purdy had. He was the one that was in his face. And I mean, he's just been doing that all year, and the defense has just been lights out. And he's the one that's been leading that charge. So for him, for Philadelphia, I'd have to go with him. And then for San Francisco, I mean, you got to go with McCaffrey. I mean, it was obvious that the game was going to be put on his shoulders once Purdy went down. Everybody on the planet knew it. And he still had 5.6 yards per carry. He had a touchdown. I think he had like almost 90 yards on the ground. He even threw a pass. I mean, the guy was pretty much he had to carry that team by himself. And obviously when a defense as good as Philadelphia's is keying in on you because they know that you're the only real threat left, then what else can you say?
Yeah. I think I take those same picks, honestly, again, with Evan. Christian McCaffrey is the only guy with any numbers. So, like, who else do you pick? And then, Hassan Reddick was just the best kind of defender that you need in the playoffs. He's everything that you hoped you have in all your defensive team.
Well, I have to go just a tad different from you guys.
Imagine that.
And I'm sorry.
I said, imagine that.
So for Philadelphia, I'm going to go with Kenneth Gainwell.
That's a good pick.
Who is this guy? I mean, Evan usually, let's be honest. Evan usually goes, well, Terrence, this is such and such. He went to this school. He was a first round pick, things of that nature. He was second round. Oh, he has this many carries. He has this many of this, that, the other. So I was really surprised. I think I actually saw him in the game. Yeah, he made an impact in the Tampa Bay game as well. I'm sorry, the Dallas game, excuse me. But Gainwell, I was really impressed with his work. And for San Francisco, I would definitely have to agree that Christian McCaffrey was going to be my pick as MVP, as the team leader, as the savior, whatever you want to call him. From my perspective, since the trade happened, and Will, you and I talked about this, me and Evan talked about this. When San Francisco, because San Francisco already had great things happening, but when they decided at that last moment to grab McCaffrey, I knew then that he was going to be a threat, and he showed that the entire season. So in the championship game, even though they didn't win, I still believe that he was the leader. He did the most outside of the defense, outside of the tight end. I felt that he did the most. So that's that. We have to take another break, and this is it, guys. I need your complete thoughts on what will happen in the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs and this awesome Philadelphia Eagles mania that is going on. We'll be right back.
To someone who's making fast money and seeing all of this money, I was just like, yeah, that the $200-300, that's not gonna cut it. I have to make more. When I created it, it was just like I said, I used to call myself King Cashmere. And when it came to creations, I just thought I wanted it all to align. But I needed him so much to the point where I didn't know how to love myself if he wasn't around. Anything. I understand you have a child, and I will never make you feel bad for providing for your child. And I just bawled in tears, like,
pretty much.
Oh my God. I started reading. I got engulfed in so much Bob Proctor material. He was a virtual mentor, but he taught me so much about who I am. I am God manifested in human form.
The moment we've all been waiting for on Grace Talks, the championship review and the Super Bowl preview. The guys are ready to give their picks, and they're going to tell us why they feel the team will win or why they feel the score will be what it will be. But we'll start with Will. Will, who's going to win this game and why? And please tell us why.
I think it's going to be the Eagles. I think that they have the more complete football team. At every single phase, they're just top tier, and that's kind of all there is to it in the end. I think that Kansas can't defend them in the way that they're going to need to, and so and they can't just outscore them either, because the Eagles are going to be able to defend Kansas. The Eagles are going to, it would not surprise me, though I don't think it's going to happen this way. It would not surprise me if Patrick Mahomes had another frustrating game like he did in the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, because that was an elite tier defense, and this is an elite tier defense.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I've been going back and forth on this. I think if Mahomes was playing at 100%, I would probably go with Kansas City just because. Sorry about that. Just because of their experience and because Mahomes is the best improviser in the NFL. He makes plays out of nothing. But seeing that he has that injury that he's just been battling all week, it's clear that he's not going to be even at maybe 90%. And I think, Philadelphia is multifaceted. They have an excellent defense, and then on offense, they're multifaceted with their passing game. A lot of people talk about Philadelphia's passing game and how elite that is, but it's their running game that leads the charge. And I think some of those backup running backs have really highlighted themselves this playoff season. Gainwell, I don't think anybody had heard of Boston Scott prior to these playoffs, but all these guys are household names on right now. And I just think that Philadelphia's defense is going to design Sirianni is going to design so many plays pressures to really throw Mahomes off with that high ankle sprain and make him try to make plays on the run. And with his ankle being the way that it is, I really think that's going to hinder their performance on offense. And as Will just said, their defense is absolutely elite. And I think that their defensive line is going to find ways to put pressure on Mahomes. I think that key for Kansas City is Kelsey, but I don't think they've played a defense that's as good as Philadelphia's. Philadelphia is going to find ways to mitigate Kelsey's impact in this game.
Well, I was getting ready to say thank you so much for that segue. Evan is having video technical difficulty, so we'll just probably be with audio until he's able to restore that. But I was just getting ready to say, what do you feel is the keys, or what are the keys to either team being successful in this game, even coming down to a field goal or a touchdown or anything like that? Will, do you have one or two keys that you could go with for Kansas City to be successful?
I think the biggest key is going to be them just giving Pat whatever he needs. If they can give him just enough time to do the thing that he does better than anybody else ever, is improvise, then they'll be okay. Because so is it possible to tell, and I really mean this, is it possible to blitz Mahomes and be successful? Oh, absolutely. If we look even just, the example that I provided just not too long ago, where they lost the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, he didn't throw a touchdown. It was remarkable. I remember watching that game with my buddy, and we were just looking at each other like, how is this possible? Is this really actually happening? They're shutting down Patrick Mahomes. So it's definitely possible to blitz Pat now. And now that he's got the high ankle sprain, if he's not going to be 100%, which he won't be, then it's just that much easier to do so. He's older and wiser than he was back then, sure. So maybe he's got better decision making. But yeah, you can do it. You can do it. But if Kansas can give him enough time, if they can pull out all the stops on the line and just play out of their minds and give him 2 seconds on each play, then they'll be okay. They have to do that at a bare minimum.
Evan,
everything else is secondary.
Evan, can you blitz Jalen Hurts and be successful? And what are some other keys that you think may help Philadelphia?
You can try, but I think he's proved this playoff season that his legs are a bigger threat, more of a threat than his arm. And his shoulder is obviously what's in question here. So if he gets, I think he's gonna have several plays that are designed for him to run the ball because of his shoulder. But yes, Kansas City does have two great defensive linemen, obviously, that are really elite, Frank Clark and Chris Jones. But then again, we got to remember Philadelphia's offensive line is probably the best in football. I think they had 3 Pro Bowl starters and then 2 Pro Bowl alternates. I mean, that's their entire offensive line right there. And I mean, what Sirianni has done with that offense, I think he's going to create ways to double team Frank Clark and especially Chris Jones to get first that time that he needs. But I think some keys for Philadelphia in this game, obviously, either one of Devontae Smith or AJ Brown is going to have a big game, because Kansas City is still going to be in this game and they're still going to play well. I think we know that Philadelphia's ground game is really going to have an impact on this game because they have so many different weapons that they can utilize, and you can't stop all of them. But I think that one of AJ Brown or Devontae Smith is going to have to show out in this game, and I think both of them are extremely capable. I don't think that they've had to be relied upon so far this playoff season because of Philadelphia's defense. Exactly.
Yeah,
because of Philly's defense.
They've not done hardly anything. I mean, obviously Smith had that crazy catch there wasn't a catch that we were talking about, but the passing game has not been for Philadelphia so far in the playoffs.
Exactly. And I mean, a lot of people don't give Kansas City secondary enough credit. Those guys showed out against the Bengals. They still, Chase and Higgins still had their stats that they had, which were pretty good. But I mean, I think they're going to do a pretty good job of mitigating that passing game. And I think that Andy Reid is going to find ways to design pressures to force Hurts to use his feet. And then it's all about him making plays with his feet, which he's definitely capable of. So, I mean, there's just so many facets of Philadelphia that are elite and hard to stop. And I mean, Kansas City could definitely win this game. But as Will said, I mean, they're going to have to give Mahomes just an eternity in that pocket for him to, make plays. Kelsey is going to have to do what he's done so far this playoff season, which is be invisible and find open spots all over the field because nobody can seem to find him anywhere.
Let's be honest. Kelsey is a ghost. He disappears and then reappears in an empty spot in the zone coverage. That's pretty much it.
And I think it just goes to show how good that his chemistry with Pat Mahomes is. I mean, those two guys are probably the best and most feared duo as far as the passing game is concerned in the NFL because, I mean,
yeah, I think that's really been highlighted by Tyreek being gone.
Exactly.
How do you lose arguably the best player, or not player, but the best receiver in the league, and then still not only just have like an incredible season, but then just turn your tight end into a number one receiver across the league, right? I think that it's like you said, that relationship between the two of them is absolutely amplified and highlighted by the fact that Tyreek Hill is not with them this year.
And that's why
it really shows that Kelsey was always the dig, or Kelsey was the dog always.
And that's why Mahomes won the MVP this year, and deservedly so, because everybody thought that passing game would have a severe drop-off once Hill departed for Miami, and all they did was honestly get better. Yeah. I mean, that just made their passing game even more scary because all these other playmakers that they have are now able to get those touches that they might not have had otherwise. And like we talked about earlier, I mean, Valdez-Scantling hasn't had the most spectacular career, but he needed to be a playmaker against Cincinnati, and he was one. And then Schuster, I mean, these guys don't demand to be a 100-yard receiver every single game. And I think that's what makes them so special, because all these guys have accepted their roles, and they're just willing to make, even if it's only 1 or 2 catches per game, if that helps them win the game, then so be it. And I think that's what's made Kansas City so lethal this playoff season and this season overall.
Well, guys, I have to say this. In my opinion, we're already expecting the wide receivers to do their thing. We're already expecting that the quarterbacks will be on display. We even can say that we're expecting at least the first or the second string running back to do their things. But I really believe this Super Bowl comes down to tight ends, having the tight end that has the better game, because I believe that since the focus will be on AJ Brown and Scantling and give me the other
Smith.
No, on Kansas City side.
Juju Smith-Schuster.
Schuster, yes. So those two are just fireballs, and even Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, all 4 of them are fireworks waiting to just go off at any given moment. The running backs can just find a hole and it's over. But if each defense is focused on those areas, the quarterback, the running backs, and the wide receivers, then it's going to be about the tight end that can get in zone and settle down, hunker down, and get a spot 6, 7, 8 yards and just work their way down the field. Agree, disagree? That's where I am.
Well,
It's something they're going to be thinking about.
Yes, and for Kansas City, especially Kelsey is going to have to be the best blocker that he's ever been, because those pass rushers on Philadelphia are going to be coming fast and furious. And then I think the key that I didn't highlight in my earlier point is running back Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, that guy, he has to make plays. I mean, he has to really have a positive impact in this game, not only in the running game, but with his blocking, because Kansas City is going to need all the blockers that they can get to protect Mahomes and that high ankle sprain that he has.
Yeah.
And I mean, Andy Reid is a genius. So, I mean, here we are highlighting Philadelphia's defense, but I know that Reid is scheming for that defense, and he's going to design a bunch of different plays to help Mahomes, make plays despite his injury. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a great game, but Pacheco has to be better than he's ever been. Excuse me.
Final score, Will.
Oh man, I don't know. This could be.
I know that's not your area, but
I think that this could go almost any way. With two teams at this caliber, with these many different things going on, with so many individual players that could all go off at any moment, this could be a 100-point game. This could be a 15-point game. But it's probably going to be relatively average. I think if you were to just look at the stat lines after the words and not watch the game, you might think, it might have been kind of a boring game. I think it's going to be in the 20s. Philadelphia is probably going to win 27-20.
Okay. Evan?
I got to go Philadelphia as well, and I don't think it's going to be an extremely low scoring game. I think there's going to be a lot of field goals in this game. I think each team is going to do a good job of going down the field and making plays, but these red zone defenses on both sides are really good. So I have to go with Philadelphia winning this game 30-23.
I'm going 27-17. Okay, final question. And we'll be ending this episode. Which team has a better chance of establishing a dynasty over the next 5 years? Evan?
Well, the Chiefs are already kind of one. I mean, this is the third Super Bowl trip in, I believe it's 5 years. I mean, as long as Mahomes is there, it's almost, nothing's guaranteed in this league. It's so good and so competitive, but it's a surefire bet that Kansas City is going to be in the championship game at least every other year. I mean, Philadelphia, Hurts has had the biggest jump as far as production goes that we've seen in some time with his play this year. Philadelphia's defense is still pretty young, and it's going to be around for a while. I mean, I'd probably give the edge to Kansas City right now just because of the division that they're in. And, Philadelphia has to deal with Dallas and the Giants, the Commanders every year, and not to mention, I think the NFL is a little bit more top-heavy in the NFC right now. So, I'd have to give the edge to Kansas City just because not only of the division, but the experience that they already have and the fact that so many of the guys that they already have are still relatively young and signed long-term. I think the key is Kelsey. Kelsey's going to be 34 this year. And, he's Mahomes' biggest security blanket, but I'd still go with, as long as he and Mahomes are there, you got to go Kansas City.
Will, any thoughts?
I think it's a hard question to answer just because, you don't know that a dynasty exists until you're about halfway through it or at the end of it. So, to try to predict who's going to start a dynasty is difficult. I think that it's probably Mahomes has the best chance to do that right now between these two. This is a kind of Philadelphia, or not just a kind of Philadelphia team, but this is the kind of team that goes to the Super Bowl and regardless of whether they win or lose, doesn't go back for another 5 or 6 years, right? Like that's just, we've seen this story before.
Yeah.
Not that they're incapable of going back, but if but that's just how it plays out, right? Like whether there's football gods or not, affecting that kind of thing. It just wouldn't surprise you to see this Philadelphia team not make it back to the Super Bowl, and maybe even Hurts doesn't ever go back ever. There's just so much about them that we haven't seen besides this season. Whereas Kansas City has been the number one seed in the AFC like 800 years in a row now.
Yeah.
And they're always there. They've been to 2 of the last 5. This will be the 3, like Evan was saying. Won one of them. Even just to make it to 3 Super Bowls in a short period of time like that. We thought it was crazy that the Patriots were doing it for so long. Because it's impossible. People give, the Bills all that garbage about making it 4 years in a row and not winning, but they made it 4 years in a row.
Right.
Exactly.
How many times has your team made it, period? So
true.
it's I think that Kansas is already building that dynasty.
And you have to remember, I think it's been prior to Philadelphia winning the NFC East this year, it had been about 20 to 22 years since the NFC East had a repeat winner. It's either the Cowboys, the Eagles, or the Giants fighting it out every single year. And every one of those teams is always really good. Like they're always playing for the playoffs. Kansas City in the AFC West is a different story. Who knows if Sean Payton is going to turn around the Broncos this year? That'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And then you got the Raiders. The Raiders, they haven't been relevant since freaking Rich Gannon was there. And then you have, who is the 4th team in the AFC West? I can't even remember right now.
Right, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's the South.
Okay, so
Texans.
Yeah.
Oh, the Chargers.
Yeah, the Chargers who blew that game against the Jaguars. So,
Yeah.
The competition in the NFC is just far more fierce every single year. It's a dogfight just to make it out of that division.
Kansas has a New England setup in that respect. You're totally right. Where, they can just run that table every single year.
Exactly. I always wonder if New England was in the NFC and they played in the NFC East, just how many Super Bowls they would have won, because it wouldn't have been as easy playing in a division.
Yeah, that's 4 or 5 guaranteed wins, right? So
yeah, all 3 of your opponents are. It seemed like they were all in rebuilding mode for the betterment of that New England dynasty over 20 years. So yeah, I'd have to go with Kansas City for sure.
Well, guys, I really appreciate you all giving us your honest opinion. And of course, we'll all be tuned in for a spectacular event this Sunday, especially halftime, from what I understand. Some people will be tuned in at halftime. Let's hope the commercials are worth something this year. Really? Will, no impression?
I don't care about the commercials.
Come on.
We're into the game here, man.
$3 million for 30 seconds. That's not important to you?
No.
Well, maybe if they throw Jeff Goldblum and Lil Wayne into a commercial again, that might be somewhat amusing.
I like them, right? But if they're good or bad, most of the time I'm just talking about what happened in the play previously.
Exactly right.
Well, to our fans and our friends, again, we appreciate you for making our numbers continue to grow week by week, month by month. We appreciate you so much for tuning in. And just know very soon we'll be airing the video episodes of the podcast on YouTube. Stay tuned for that information. But once again, as we always say, thank you so much for tuning in to Grace Talks. And remember, as you go about your day, you go about your week, take a little time to grow with grace.